Tonight on Primetime Politics, an emotional Peter Sloly takes the stand.
Do you feel that they were misunderstood?
Yes.
The embattled former Ottawa police chief testifies before the Bordeleau inquiry, past witnesses painting a picture of chaos and dysfunction. We will hear what Peter Sloly had to say about the protest that terrorized people in his city. And
hello, I'm Peter Van Dusen, and this is Primetime Politics on CPAC.
a moment to say thank you. Peter Van Dusen is signing off. This is Primetime Politics. Hello everyone, I'm Michael Serapio. The name of Ottawa's embattled former police chief has come up more than once at the Bordeleau inquiry, criticized for his leadership, his interactions with other police forces, and the chaos that was the convoy protest. Peter Sloly finally got his chance to take the stand, at one point getting emotional as he talked about the efforts of his former force.
They were doing their very best under inhuman circumstances, like the city was, like the community was. It was too cold and it was too much. But they did their very best. And I'm grateful to them. And they should be celebrated. Not celebrated, that's the wrong word. They should be understood.
Do you feel that they were misunderstood?
Yes.
To walk us through this first day of testimony from Peter Sloly, we're now joined by our journalist panel. We are once again joined this week by Tonda MacCharles, who is covering the inquiry for the Toronto Star, and Christopher Nardi, who is covering the inquiry for the National Post. Hello to the two of you.
Hi, Michael.
Hi. Listen, Tonda, I wonder if you might start us out here and talk to us about the significance of this testimony. Because, you know, Peter Sloly, of course, he has figured largely in the inquiry, but this is his first day to appear and to testify. Just how important is his testimony?
It's important in this respect. He's trying to push back against a picture that's been painted of him so far in most of the other testimony we've heard, of a police boss who was basically under strain of the stress of the situation, suspicious of anyone who was coming in to help, running down in the chain of command to micromanage operations, and that he was basically very cynical or suspicious of sort of the other forces that were trying to help, or the political leaders who were also sort of overseeing all of this. And Sloly, in his own testimony, is really trying to paint a different picture of himself. He's trying to cast himself as a progressive, caring, compassionate police leader who did believe in negotiations, not just cracking heads in an enforcement operation. And so for him, his own reputation, this is important. But look, there's been a wealth of information so far that has essentially cast his leadership as not up to the moment of the crisis last winter.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to pick up on the point that Tonda makes there about being a more sensitive leader, Christopher, because we did see that emotional moment with Chief Bordeleau on the stand. And here he is fighting back tears. But I'm wondering if that has to do with his feelings about his members, or just how much stress that he's under right now.
I think it's a little bit of both, Michael, quite frankly. I do feel that he looked at how his officers were being treated during the convoy and felt for them, right? Felt bad. There was a lot of criticism towards the Ottawa Police Service, and, you know, presumably we're going to find out a lot of it was warranted, because we are seeing a lot of dysfunction internally at the police service, at the city, and just throughout multiple levels of response to this crisis, right? So he clearly had this emotional reaction. I don't think that we can necessarily omit the fact that he may also be trying to increase public sympathy, right? It looks good. He probably knew that clip would play on TV. It would run in the, you know, we would talk about him as a teary-eyed police chief in the media coverage, and he's basically just trying to kind of rehabilitate his reputation amongst police forces, but also in the eyes of the public. So I don't think it was disingenuous. This was an extremely difficult moment for him. He did lose his job over it as well, and it continues to be a difficult moment for him, clearly. But I do think that, and some of the messages I've gotten even personally, is that a lot of people aren't necessarily biting, right? They don't necessarily believe that he deserves, let's say, the sympathy that I think he's trying to get.
Well, yeah, there are these big charges that he's going to have to answer for. One of them has to do with how he dealt with the intelligence that was out there, because we did hear from the OPP and even Sloly's subordinates that there was intelligence to suggest, for example, that the protests would not just be a one-weekend affair, that the protesters, at least some of them, were going to stay until all mandates were dropped and the government resigned. Talk to us, Tonda, a little bit about how Sloly addressed that, because that is a fairly big charge that he was not listening to the intelligence that was available.
Well, stunningly, one of the things that Sloly admitted here is that he hadn't actually read one of his own internal officers' assessments of the threat that was coming. Look, there are stacks of intelligence warnings that we've been shown already from the OPP. Peter Sloly says he saw them as early as 2 weeks before the protests arrived, and yet he still maintains that there wasn't enough detail in there that would have informed any police service in the country of what was coming Ottawa's way, that it was going to be a protest that would entrench for the long haul. And he says that only dawned on him and his force, the first weekend. Today he's saying that dawned on him on the Saturday morning. Well, he's testified previously to inquiry lawyers that it dawned on him around the weekend from Saturday, the first weekend, into the Tuesday. And that's when the Ottawa cops really started trying to come up with a new plan. He says, oh, no, we weren't trying a new plan. We weren't trying to reorient ourselves. We were just building on what we knew was a difficult problem and defending that they were prepared to adapt and to basically deal with violence or whatever would erupt. But basically, they had only planned for a traffic event, a 2-day traffic blockage. And so some of this, slowly blaming the intelligence for not being detailed enough, saying, why weren't the RCMP and other federal partners giving us better intelligence? It's all hindsight is 2020, isn't it? The fact is, there are warnings that were there and available to the Ottawa police that were basically ignored.
Well, and not only from agencies like the OPP, there was, for example, social media, the messages out there from protesters themselves stating that they were going to stay a long time. Christopher, talk to us a bit about that, because there is the intelligence that is given by officials. There's also the intelligence that essentially are open source that could be available to anybody.
Well, honestly, Mike, I don't think there's more open source than opening up almost any newspaper that was documenting the convoy as it descended on Ottawa, quoting almost all the organizers saying, we will not leave Ottawa until the vaccine mandates are gone, or we will not leave Ottawa until the COVID-19 public health measures are gone. It was a message that organizers repeated ad nauseum from day one and was repeated in the media. So it does feel so surprising for police chiefs and politicians possibly to be able to look at the public now and say, well, listen, we had no idea, because, I mean, people can say that they come in for, a long time, but they always leave. They always leave. But there are so many indications that this protest was unique in so many ways. It had fundraised millions of dollars online. It was gathering support, not necessarily losing it, at many steps of the way as it converged on Ottawa from everywhere across the country, right? And so he received this. And what I find interesting, Michael, also is that we've heard from police officers about how either they warned upwards that they felt like there was this, quote, bizarre disconnect, as some have said, between what the intelligence was saying and what the OPS was planning for that weekend. Or, alternatively, we've heard people say, well, what was reported to me was that it'll just be a weekend. But I don't feel like we've seen the actual intelligence or actually heard, people in the OPS say, I'm the one who was saying it's just a weekend, or this is the document that I'm relying on that was telling us it's just a weekend, ignore every other warning we've gotten. So we've gotten a lot of proof that they should have known it was long, and I feel like the proof that kind of supported the weekend-only theory is very scarce and very hard to find.
And there's also the issue of a broken command structure, Tonda, because we have in the past few days already heard criticisms of the Ottawa Police Service being dysfunctional, that there was chaos amongst the ranks, and really Sloly did not dissuade us of that opinion, because he too is acknowledging there seemed to be a broken command structure.
Oh, yeah, no, he's not denying that in any way. And in fact, the information isn't like from the outside looking in. A lot of the forces were saying, oh, my God, the Ottawa police are in a mess. internally, the Ottawa police are admitting they were a mess. The two top deputies came and said, the pandemic had depleted their ranks. They had many senior departures, and by the time this crisis hit, they didn't have the staff to deal with it at the best of times, and now it was the worst of times suddenly. And Sloly himself is saying, yeah, I had to go down, cross the boundaries of where I wouldn't ordinarily go into operational level commanders and say, we've got a plan to get them out of here. And, he said, in his words, he said, I wanted them to implement the hell out of it. Look, if he's using that language at the inquiry, one can only imagine what language he used in the room with his officers. It was a very tense, strained time. He said he lost confidence in two of his top deputies over a decision to change operational commanders midstream in the early days, like in the first week. And at that point, he says that he felt they were in a national security crisis. So look, this was a force not just under strain, but buckling, crumbling under the strain and begging for outside help. And that outside help was very long in coming because the outside agencies said they didn't have a clue what Ottawa and Peter Sloly wanted to do with their officers. So honestly, a big mess. And I can't stress enough, even though we all saw it and covered it, how shocking it is to hear all these details and to see just what really the state of affairs was there.
And we continue to learn more. This is just day one of 2 days of testimony for Peter Sloly. So perhaps the three of us will come together again and speak about this. But for now, thank you for adding your voices to the story that's unfolding right now in the inquiry.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael. And
that is Tonda MacCharles from the Toronto Star and Christopher Nardi from the National Post.
And all of the reports, the briefings that I was receiving through my chain of command was that this was going to be a weekend event, some arriving the Thursday, more arriving the Friday, the bulk arriving for planned or at least scheduled events on the Saturday and the Sunday, that there might be some remnant that would stay behind, but that remnant would be similar to other demonstrations that had come through where people stayed in the national capital region for a variety of reasons, but in some cases setting up small tent cities that would at some point over the subsequent days, weeks, and in some cases months, would be gradually through a measured approach with multi-agency involvement from NCR and the city. They would be eventually moved either to a better location or moved back to wherever they had originally come from. I want to be clear. I've expressed my gratitude to Commissioner Creek on multiple occasions, even after my resignation, about the quality of the intelligence support that we received from the OPP and specifically around the quality of the Hendon reports. But in the totality, sir, I do not recall, and to this day, even with the benefit of hindsight, I do not have any clear impression or saw any clear conclusions that we were going to have anything more than what I was being briefed on by my team. This was going to be a Thursday, Friday, mainly Saturday, Sunday event with the potential for a smaller group to remain behind, but in numbers that we had managed previously. Assuming that even on the 28th, Commissioner, that we decided to lock down the city, close off all the interprovincial bridges and the off-ramps from the 416 and 417 highways, we would have needed, in Deputy Chief Bell's estimation, 2,000 officers. I think it would have actually been more. Even if that was our wish, even if that was the clearest conclusion that came from any of the Hendon reports or any other combination of intelligence or legal opinions, on the 28th of January, we were not going to get 2,000 extra officers into the city and deployed on a plan that could execute and implement anything that relates to this.
With his thoughts on Peter Sloly's testimony so far, we're now joined by Charles Bordeleau. He is the former chief of the Ottawa Police Service. Chief Bordeleau, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Good to see you.
So a lot to talk about here, but I do want to begin really with that moment that we just shared with our audience. Former Chief Sloly really having an emotional time as he was testifying, talking about the members of his force. But it was also interesting to hear his words. He said it was too much. They did their best. What do you make of that?
Well, I saw him testify during the parliamentary committee, and it's a point in time where he becomes emotional when he talks about his officers, and I get that because they went through hell. That those 3 weeks were very tough on them at a time when the public eye was on them and lots of criticism geared towards the Ottawa Police Service. So he felt for them, whether it be the weather, the circumstances they're working on, and their inability to gain control of the situation. I think it was a moment of empathy towards what the officers were feeling.
Mm-hmm. And yet there are still these gaps, these questions that remain in people trying to understand. For example, the matter of intelligence. Chief Sloly, in one instance, talking about the details he was getting before the protests rolled into town, saying that nothing suggested that the protesters would actually be there for a long time. But again, the intelligence suggested otherwise. What does that tell you about the failure of that intelligence, or maybe the failure to interpret that intelligence?
I think it's rather the failure to interpret the intelligence. You've got the OPP on one hand, who is producing these products, who's telling them this is a longer, protracted event. Yet the Ottawa Police Service, including the chief, who admittedly skimmed some of the reports, not believing that this will be a long, protracted event, thinking this will be only a weekend. Interesting as well, he points to the national framework of intelligence failing him. Yet the Hendon reports talked about a national movement. So I'm not too sure what other elements RCMP or the Integrated Threat Assessment Center would have provided him that would have helped him understand better what was going on. Because the OPP reports were fairly clear. This is a national movement coming to Ottawa, and there was connection between the different points and elements in the convoy. And it was a longer duration point. They just chose to, for whatever reason, not take that into consideration from their planning perspective.
Mm-hmm. So again, to your point, a failure to interpret the intelligence. Let's also talk about communication, though, because even before Chief Sloly took to the stand this week, there was talk about the chaos even amongst the command structure with Ottawa Police. Based on what you heard from Sloly today, what stands out for you?
In a command and control scenario, you need clarity of communication. Your message and your mission and your words matter. And there seems to be a pattern here internally and externally that his words are being misinterpreted or not clearly understood. Whether it's the issue around this is not a policing solution, or when he's talking to his incident commanders around direction that he's providing in an operational environment where he should have been at the strategic level. And different interpretations as to what his deputies and his commanders thought he was saying. And you see the differences in notes that were being taken. So I found in my 10 years as chief that words matter, and you have to be very clear in your messaging, and so that there is no misunderstanding as to what you are saying and what your intent is.
Mm-hmm. And quickly here, because I'm losing time, Sloly's next appearance will be on Monday. Anything you're keeping a keen eye on?
Well, we saw that Chief Sloly has a tendency of showing a lot of emotion and also being defensive. So some anger issues are coming out a bit, I think, in some of his testimony, or defensiveness perhaps is the more proper word. So he's going to have to be careful around that, especially during cross. He needs to be straightforward and bring some answers that people are looking for, but his tone, he needs to be careful of the tone that he's using.
Charles Bordeleau, thank you very much for the time today.
You're quite welcome.
Well, we wanted to end today's program with a special guest and a special, although sad occasion, which is why the background is different. After 21 years with CPAC, Peter Van Dusen retires after today, so there was no way we were going to let him go before saying a goodbye on air. So Peter Van Dusen joins us right now. Congratulations.
Thanks very much, Michael. That's a little odd.
I was going to say, you're so used to being on this side of the desk.
I don't mind it here, though. This is fine.
No, how does it feel, though? Like, I mean, you're retiring after today, and this is actually not really a goodbye, because I'm sure we're going to be calling you out of retirement from time to time to still be part of the programming. But how does it feel to essentially end your daily duties?
You know, it feels it feels great in the sense that I'm going to be spending more time with my family, which everybody wants to do at a certain age. It also feels really good, I think, to know, what I'm leaving. I mean, we had such a great team of committed people to the notion of public service and giving people a front row seat on democracy, and I was proud to be part of that team. So it feels really good to have had that experience over 21 years here and 40 plus years working in other media outlets. And knowing that you're here now, and knowing that some other very, very good people are joining CPAC, I think that says a lot about where the operation is. But most of all, I'm just really happy and proud of the fact that as a team of people, we built something that I think's become a pretty important service to Canadians, and may become even more important given the sort of media climate we're in.
Yeah. Well, I will say, as people speak to me on the streets, they congratulate me for this new role, but they all note the big shoes that I have to fill. And it's like, I'm not filling Peter's shoes. I'm going to follow the path that you've essentially created for us to follow. But when you think of your own contribution, I know you're very humble about this, but when you think about the own contribution that you have made to really Canadian democracy, to Canadian media, political journalism in this country, what do you hope you'll be remembered for?
It's an interesting question, and I have to be honest, I've really never given it much thought. I've looked at this, I never really looked at it as a job, and it's a little different than a lot of other places, as you know. It's more of a calling. I've often said to people, if you need to desperately be seen on television, maybe CPAC's not the place for you in terms of the anchor, because we've always put the sort of content first, and once you have that sort of driving your daily conversations, they always become about the content. It's always more important for people to see what's being said and who's saying it, and showing them all of it, as opposed to snippets of it that you see on the nightly news. And I'm not here to trash the nightly news. They have a certain role they play as well. But we always sort of understood the role here, and I always understood it was to put yourself in the sort of background, except to be the sort of traffic cop and the person sort of guiding the content, but not influencing the content, not trying to tell people what to think about the content. So I guess if I'm proud of anything, it's that I was smart enough to grab the opportunity when it came up to be part of a place like this and have the content sort of dictate the kind of role you played, as opposed to saying, I'd rather do this, and show them this, that, this. No, this is where the action is, and they deserve to be able to see it all and decide for themselves what's being said, what's being decided, and what it means to them.
You mentioned looking forward to spending more time with your family, and CPAC, we actually had a special retirement party for you earlier in the week, and it was nice to see your wife there, your kids there. What have they meant for you over the years? Because I think people get a sense of it, but to be a journalist, especially a political journalist in this country, it is early morning, late at night, day after day, often weekends, often holidays. How important has your family been through these 21 years for you?
Well, you know it, you're a dad. So I mean, the challenge is always to try and balance those things. And I suppose I come from a bit of a different family. I have 6 brothers and sisters, and at one point all of us worked in journalism. My dad was a journalist. So there's at least within your own family, there's a sort of barometer there for how valuable time is. And so, my wife Anna and my kids, Alex and Madison, yes. I always felt, I always understood what I was missing, but I always tried to do what I could to maximize the time I had with them. But you're right. In the last couple of weeks, the changes have happened here. Yeah. I've just discovered there's a whole world out there between 5 and 7:30 at night that I was never usually a part of. We were here.
What do you mean it's not question period? What do you mean?
Yeah, and so what happened? What would I do when I get home when it's not dark? So a lot of late nights, and I did miss time with the kids, but I think they understood what I did, and I always kept them sort of in that journey, and and understood what I thought I had was not me personally, but I thought that the reason I was gone was to tell and to show Canadians these important events happening in their lives. So I missed some stuff, but the family's tight, the family's good. Kids were there the other night.
There's no doubt that your kids and your wife loves you. That was really evident on Wednesday, and that was wonderful to see. So, quickly losing time.
Yeah,
but,
understood.
A message for the people that have watched you these many years, because you mean something to Canadians, and I'm sure a lot of people will shed a tear that you're not going to be here day after day.
Yeah, and probably some of them will be applauding that I'm not here. My only message is when you tune into CPAC, if you tune into CPAC, odds are you know why you're doing it, and keep doing it and spread the word, because it is. I think, and I've worked at the other two mainstream networks in the country too, or the bigger ones, and there is something special about what we do here in terms of, letting Canadians see it for themselves, giving them a front row seat, and not trying to tell them what to think, but giving them all of the information they need to come to their own conclusions. So that's what I would say. Hope you think we're valuable. Hope you keep watching, and make sure you do and keep tuning into this guy. It'll be so much better than what you had with me.
No. Although I will say, because of the great work you've done and your dedication, when CPAC came to me, it was a very obvious choice. I in great awe and respect of your work. So thank you.
Well, the feeling's mutual, and thanks so much for coming to join the team and take us to great heights.
Yeah, well, I'll be calling you from time to time. Peter Van Dusen,
Michael.
thank you. Congratulations on the retirement.
Thank you.
And that was my earlier conversation with Peter Van Dusen. We're going to miss him around here. I'm Michael Serapio. Thank you for joining us today. For everyone here at CPAC, have a great weekend. We'll see you tomorrow.